Right, everyone is good. Okay, without further ado, I call upon the first speaker of side proposition. Hi,
Okay, before I start, would I like just to check that I'm visible and audible?
yes, you are.
True freedom requires a baseline of protection and resources. Autonomy is meaningless if people are starving, uneducated, homeless, or illegally discriminated against. So, as proposition, we strongly prefer to be born into a culture of individualism because it guarantees non-negotiable rights and dignity to every single person, especially minorities, instead of allowing them to be sacrificed for the comfort of the majority. So, we define individualism as prioritizing the individual, valuing independence, personal freedom, and individual achievement. We define collectivism as a belief that prioritizes the group over the individual and emphasizing cooperation, shared responsibility, and social harmony. So, as the first speaker, we'll be discussing protection of minority communities, while my second speaker will be talking about individual happiness, and my third speaker will take care of rebuttals, clashes, and weighing. So, now I'd like to move on to some framing. So, what does collectivist communities look like on their world? Well, what it looks like on their world is that they care about the community more. However, on our side, we want each individual to be autonomous beings and we want to be free. But in order for this to happen, you need a baseline level of resources. Autonomy is meaningless if people lack the minimum conditions to exercise choice. If someone is starving, if they're homeless, if they're denied education, then their freedom, quote, exists only on paper. In an individualist society, this baseline is enshrined in law as individual rights, and it's not just granted conditionally by the community. Frames taking away from minorities as for the greater good, not considering the minorities. This is because they try to appeal to the greater group instead of the tiny minority for more benefits such as support on their side of the world. The minorities have less power, so they are discriminated against. An example of this is Malaysia, which uses collectivism to justify oppression and racism. So what happens here is that there is a difference from individualist societies. Each individual is a valued member of society, treated with dignity and respect, and minorities will have a say. This means that we value and respect each individual, including minorities. The individualistic society's goal is for each individual to pursue what they really want to maximize their personal happiness. When goals contrast on our side, on their side of the world, the desires of individuals will be prioritized as well. But what's not good is that they lack the value and dignity that they give each an individual person on their side of the world, which exists on our side. And we focus on personal autonomy and self-reliance. And as we said, we value individuals for who they are. So now, how do we actually protect minority communities? Well, most of the time, what minority communities want contradicts what's good for society, or they're kind of just contrasting from what the majority wants. So what this means is that communities can be arbitrary and harmful. The basis of a community is similarity. If you are similar, then you are in. If you are different, then you are out. Similarity can be looks, appearance, way of life, and this is why minorities are not a part of the community. So how are they even supposed to benefit from collectivism if they're not even a part of this group? So, for example, people who share the dominant race or ethnicity, they fit the normal sexuality and gender, they come from middle or higher upper class backgrounds, or they speak the dominant language without an accent. These individuals are seen as the default members of society. Their needs are assumed to be normal and legitimate, but minorities are perceived as exceptions to the norm.
Point of information.
Beneficiaries of social systems. Yes, I'll take that.
Wouldn't it make more sense for minorities to stick together as a community?
How will minorities be able to stick together with the community if the community does not care about their needs? If they want like social good for the wider society, they won't care about what the minority wants because they make such a small percentage of the community. They will say, oh, we have to do this, we have to sacrifice you because it's for the better good. Do you really want that? Do you really think minorities will really gain any benefits from the majority? No, they will not. So for example, your needs as a minority will contrast with the wider society. For example, if you're disadvantaged in any society with limited resources like jobs, housing, education, choices about who receives support are inherently zero sum. Benefiting the majority will be at the expense of the minority. So people have been told since they were young that you need to respect the majority. In other words, tough enough because it's for the better. It's for the good of the society as a whole. But you can only achieve a level of freedom if you fulfill a certain standard. And they don't have this on their side of the world. But on our side of the world, we have a baseline of support in order to help the minorities reap the benefits. So, with that being said, they could try and correct the imbalance by forcefully allocating positions in the name of community, but this justification usually follows this very clean chain. Society is unequal because of historical or structural imbalances. These harm social cohesion and productivity. Individual merit cannot be separated from social background, and therefore outcomes must be actively managed to reflect community needs. Forced allocation is not coercion, it is correction. They try and redefine coercion as fairness restoration, but that simply doesn't work. On their side, they say we are the majority and we need to benefit. So if we benefit, it would be good for the most of our society. And from this, we can get over oppressive and racist societies. And this is simply not what we stand for as proposition, because we stand for the rights of minorities. We want minorities to be able to achieve the same standard of living as the rest of our society. But this is simply not possible because they're such a marginalized group. And so opposition claims society is kind, and we agree. But kindness in collectivist societies is bounded by community identity. Okay, so if you're part of their group, then you can reap the benefits. But tight-knit communities depend on these similarities to create belonging. And this sharpens the boundary between us and them, majority versus minority. And as a result, minorities are never fully inside the circle of care. They are tolerated, conditional members at best, and this is why the unkindness concentrates at the margins of society, even when the community sees itself as compassionate. And because of this, because we want to protect our vulnerable groups, which is the minority, which is why we stand strongly for proposition. Thank you.
Here, I thank the first prop, and now I call upon the first op. Here.
I'm making sure that I'm audible and visible.
You are, but there was a slight echo just now, so try doing a
Is this
test again.
better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The great trick of the capitalist world that we are shackled by is the lie that only we matter. In this pursuit of the I, we have happily abandoned the qualities and values which we have for centuries believed to be our unique strength. Our inability to see past ourselves have become the engine for our worst instincts: unfettered greed, deception to enrich ourselves, desertion of our most vulnerable. We reject this world and believe that one where we are all looked out for one another is the world that side opposition would prefer to live in. First, one rebuttal for the House today, and others will be integrated in my speech. So they said that individualistic societies can help minorities so that they can avoid being trapped into the power imbalance where majorities are catered to. This is not true because we think that collectivist groups exist on a spectrum, right? And they are defined by identities. Minorities will then form their own collectivist groups that fight for their own ideals. Not that in the example they used, Malaysia. For example, Malaysia formed a collectivist society to champion and help the rights of Muslims and Malays. But even if we think that even if in the worst case, it's mutually exclusive that minority groups do not have rights and dignity also. On their side, individualism does not help minorities, and it actually only helps minorities in name. Not to mention, how do they help minorities if they are alone without having others and a group to fight against those who disadvantage them, versus if they have a community that faces the same struggles as them, which I will also elaborate on in my substantive later. Furthermore, they don't actually explain how people can eventually succeed over majorities when they are stuck in an individualistic society. These harms at best exist on both ends, where the rich gets richer, people only talk to each other to gain connections, to earn more money. Individuals continue to push down the minorities, especially if they show threats of climbing up the ladder. We tell you what is better is when they focus on other sources of fulfillment. So with this, we co-opt their benefits with helping minorities that they actually disadvantage on their side. So now onto my first, I'm going to frame what a culture of collectivism actually looks like, right? It looks like two things: the creation of societal expectations that emphasize social duty, i.e. narratives that you owe a duty to those around you, and emphasis on your special obligations, manifesting in the form of societal expectations that govern your day-to-day life. Second, it also looks like the creation of laws that force you to act in the interest of your community community. For example, a UBI funded by tax money. So secondly, I'm going to explain 4 reasons why, left to our own tendencies, society is likely to devolve into an individualistic society to begin with. So 4 reasons to this. First, on meritocracy and capitalism. Your individual success is dependent on you taking opportunities away from others. You fail when other people succeed, predisposing us to perceive others as obstacles to our success and as competitors instead of collaborators. Second, on proximity of impacts. We feel the impacts of our own actions and most closely, right? Because self-centeredness is hardwired into our brains at birth, where the thoughts and feelings of others have to be communicated to us somehow, but our own feelings are immediate, urgent, and real. This can be seen through when the stock market crashes. We don't think about the mass layoffs of the underclass, but the dent in our own portfolios. Third, on global instability, we see that we get desensitized to the suffering of other people over time. And fourth, on technology, we are becoming increasingly isolated. And this is so important because people are positioned into thinking and acting selfishly. We think that resisting against means that we get the chance to create meaningful and genuine human connection when we think we are in the position to do so to even begin with. So onto my substantive on why is community as a priority good. 2 levels. First, on a practical level, thinking of other people is usually better because when everyone thinks about each other, everyone is taken care of. We see that as having others who are willing to extend help and support in your time of need and vulnerability allows the maximization of collective happiness. We also see that living is not easy. Having a support network, i.e. of people having been through the similar experiences as you have, provides you comfort because you feel seen and validated when your struggles are shared by others. This cushions against the worst risk of mental harms. Second level, on a principle level, community is the only way to validate our own lives. We see that with an absence of community, we have no frame of reference to judge the values of our lives. The same way that we know how to identify happiness because we have experienced sadness before. We see that communities provide a frame for us to give meaning into our own lives, and we see the impact of our actions on others and their reactions. And this in turn affirms our existence. So how do we build more of such communities on our side, right? It is first important to know that our ability to engage in large communities only works if everyone buys in, meaning that when individualists opt out, they exploit the system and can no longer function. So what is the mech here, right? Is that being born into a culture of collectivism changes the way that we act on a deep level. So how does this new societal norm manifest? It manifests in 2 ways. First, on societal expectations. People feel as if there's a standard to which they need to act, or else they will face social judgment and be left out. Second, on how institutions and social policies, meaning that there's taxation to fund social services, i.e. forcing individuals to contribute back into society. So why does this create tipping points in behavior, right? 3 ways. First, people regulate themselves. You're then taught from an early age to value collectivism. For example, sharing is caring, do unto others what you would have them do unto you, and impulse control. Second, people regulate each other. We see that social prestige and status rely on how other people view you, meaning following collective norms is socially rewarded and individualism is criticized. And third, we become rewired psychologically to view collective happiness as inherently rewarding. There's a greater feedback loop where we are also ourselves more likely to receive kindness, which reinforces more good in return. So what are the impacts of today's debate, right? This is a rebuttal to proposition's claim on how we don't help minorities on our side. We see that we are actually better for the most vulnerable actors, right? Because the most vulnerable actors are obviously in positions of suffering. These actors have the least power to act in their own self-interest, and that they are the most easily exploited by powerful individuals. When collective societies try to address the problems, it largely goes to the vulnerable individuals who experience the most suffering and have the least individual capacity to solve it. And for all the reasons above, I am so incredibly proud to oppose.
Yeah, all right. I think first op, and now I call upon second prop. Yeah, so
Hi, am I visible and audible?
you are audible, but you're not visible.
Oh, what about now?
Now you're visible.
Okay, so my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Judge, at the core of this debate is a simple question whether who gets to decide what a good life looks like. So before my argument, I would like to start with a few pieces of rebuttals. First of all, opposition mentioned how we don't help minorities because minorities are alone without a community. However, this is completely not true because, as we've already framed, individualistic societies prioritize in respecting every single person as an individual. This means that we value the goals and desires of every single individual. In fact, minorities are ever more alone in the so-called community on their side. As my first speaker has already mentioned, the key characteristic of a community is similarity. A minority is the completely opposite to this. Thus, they're out of the group and they're even more isolated on opposition's world. They have also mentioned about the creation of social expectations. While this is completely wrong because there in fact are more social expectations in a collectivistic community where everyone is expected to prioritize everything as a whole and as a society, while individualistic communities respect every person's personal path. Opposition also mentioned how proposition doesn't help others, but when you can't even help yourself, you can't do that either. And if when you save others when you're happy, you will do so.
Point of information.
To be benefited in some ways, for example, charities or your reputations. Yes. Okay, I'll go on. And then opposition also mentioned how minorities stick together as a community. However, each minority is different. We don't see what benefits does it bring for minorities to stick together. They can't help others in the same group when they can't even save themselves. Then now these people will be negatively impacted as a whole while no one surviving. And opposition also targeted on how collectivism means everyone cares for the society. And even if in opposition's best case, where collectivist societies are stable and everyone works together for the good of society, we still win this debate because in their society models only functions by prioritizing what is mainstream and what is
Point of information.
Oh, thank you. While the minorities are completely ignored in a collective society, societal good is not neutral. It's defined by, one, the dominant culture, the majority's values, and what is considered normal or acceptable by the society. This means that everyone who falls outside the mainstream is automatically deprioritized. Minorities, whether by their identity, belief, lifestyles, or values, are expected to suppress who they are for the sake of social harmony. Their voices are not heard, and they are tolerated at the best, but at worst, they're completely ignored. The moment a society wants to start protecting minorities, it must allow individuals to act against this collective expectations. If they do not, the minority's suffering is simply justified as an acceptable cost for social benefits. While in our world, we do not require anyone to be sacrificed. Individualism does not mean chaos or selfishness, but in fact means the society does not decide whose happiness and values matters more. Every individual will be treated as morally significant, not just those who fit into the majority's ideal. So maybe the oppositions can claim that they hold more kindness, but only at the expense of minorities and vulnerable groups. On an individual level, minorities are more likely to buy into discrimination, racist, and oppressive values. However, minorities are not okay with it because they believe it's just what they accept it because the logic is made to sound inevitable, moral, and even protective. If minorities truly had equal powers and protections, they wouldn't need to justify their own exclusion in the name of social good. Now moving on to my argument about maximizations on individual happiness. First of all, we allow people to choose their own life path. This means they are free from rigid social expectations. In many collective cultures, individuals are born to pre-decided roles. So expectations form from families, cultural norms, community reputations, societal expectations. For example, in China, most households expect their children to be a doctor, lawyer, or an engineer. People are expected to be self-sacrificing and expected to prioritize family honor over personal desire. Your value is tied in collective cultures. Your value is tied to how well you fulfill the role society expects you to be, but not how fulfilled you are as a person. Because one, the goal of collectivist societies is for everyone to succeed together as a society amish. In order for this to happen, everyone needs to do what they're supposed to do that benefits society instead of individuals in favor of the society instead of self-interest. In this case, even if an individual is talented or interested in elsewhere, they will be framed as selfish, shameful, or anything else. We believe happiness cannot be maximized without genuine choice. True happiness requires, one, autonomy, second, personal passion and determination, third, freedom to quit, lose, or to change to another direction. Collectivist cultures often only allow on straightforward correct path. And in a community, many people are different because, well, nowadays society has been more developed, which means individuals are more exposed to social media. They see different types of people. This creates more path and life path for each person or different identities such as LGBTQ. People may seem to succeed socially, but actually they are internally unfulfilled, living for society approval or to fulfill societal expectations rather than what they themselves truly want. Third, about individualism, cultural values. In culture values, each individual can want different things. Society does not prescribe what is happiness, while it protects each individual's right to pursue their own happiness. This looks like personal choice are not judged. Success is defined individually, not socially. On a group level, we protected minorities. No one will be sacrificed for social benefits. On a group levels, we protect minorities. No one will be sacrificed for social benefits. On an individual level, we maximize happiness. People are free to choose their own path and live authentically. Now moving on to the last few pieces of weighing. In opposition's world, stability is prioritized over fulfillment of individuals. The majority of preferences dominate the society's choice. Minorities are ignored, and happiness is shallow and conditional on conformity. While in prop's world, everyone has the freedom to choose their own path. Minorities are protected. Happiness is deeper because it is more authentic. Judge, a society cannot claim to maximize happiness if it only works for those who fit in. True happiness is only possible when every individual is free to choose who they want to be. And thus, I'm so proud to propose.
Alright, okay. Yeah, I thank the second prop. Now I call upon the second op. Here.
Can I check that I'm visible and audible?
Yeah.
Is that yes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. It is impossible to reach your goal when the goalpost keeps moving. That is the reality of capitalist societies today, when you are constantly told that you are not rich enough, not beautiful enough, not ambitious enough. This shifting sense of the individualist society constantly ensures that people will never feel as though they belong and to be happy. Collective societies bypass this, enshrining values beyond the material, and instead seek to fulfill the social, emotional values that we think adhere deep in the human conditions. First of all, for a huge rebuttal for the House today. They said that minorities are respected as a person in individualistic societies. That's what they base their entire argument on. On our side, they claim that people are kicked out for not being in the majority, not fitting those standards. First of all, we think that's not true. I think that because we have capitalistic incentives on their side, people want to make sure that they are stayed on top. People want to make sure that when they see a face that's not as not as rich as them, they choose to push them down because they show no use to them to help them climb up the ladder. If they show any threats, we often go to survival mode on individualistic societies and to protect themselves by pushing down the minorities. Secondly, because we think that their minorities are welcomed into the community because of the regulations that my LO suggested, where people have laws that tell them to act well to others, to tell them to regulate themselves. If they were taught to treat their own people well and to prioritize being kind, I don't understand why someone being slightly different than them would suddenly be ignored and bullied when they were grown on the fact that they have to treat others with kindness. When our points of fulfillment strays away from such stigmas, it is precisely because of individualistic societies that people look down on the minorities who have no use of helping push them up to the top and to help their self-interest. I think that even if minorities are kicked out of these communities, we think that this just pushes minorities to create their own communities. You gain more power because you work together. If you keep getting rejected by the big majority, you tend to look towards the minorities. On their side, let's say they claim that minorities also create their own communities. What happens is that these people cannot trust each other because of the competitive nature of individualistic societies. This makes it exclusive. So let's say on their side, they have a group of minorities. Once a person gets a golden pass to help them join the majority, we don't understand why they wouldn't take that pass on their side when they can help their self-interest and help fulfill the capitalistic interest that they have on individualistic societies. Furthermore, we say that on their side, we have groups where people are kicked out if they're not part of their identity. We think that this is symmetrical on their side. If you do not fit a certain look of a successful person, people are less likely to give you opportunities because they associate you with someone who will not help them. So let's say on their side, individualistic societies, when you're hiring someone, if someone doesn't look competent enough, they look like they grew up with low class, how are these minorities going to grow and climb the ladder on their side without a community that they can trust and without a community that they can make sure that they won't betray each other? So now individual fulfillment in a self-centered culture is often intentionally unattainable. This is designed in that manner by capitalistic forces as it generates a hedonic treadmill which constantly dangles the next best life for you to attain for a few reasons why. Firstly, because of the culture of consumerism. We are misled by consumerist forces such as advertising and marketing, which introduces increasing unattainable standards. Collectivism avoids this by placing a priority on the maintenance of cultures which prize modesty, contentedness, and empathy. And And B, because of the capitalistic society, our lives revolve around materialistic pursuits, getting a good job and a good home. Individuals are trapped in a rat race where they typically have no chance to consider what fulfillment actually looks to them. Why is this important? Because individuals on proposition continuously chase materialistic goals under the delusion that it will make them happy. They say that success is individually measured. You can't even attain the ideal set of success on our side. How do you feel like you belong? How do you feel like you're succeeding on our side? Individuals on prop still forces conformity on their side. So even in a collectivist society that forces trade-offs, individuals' fulfillment on our side is still better than that in an individualistic society. We think that this is for a few reasons why. First of all, because of the conformity to collectivism still provides levels to freedom. The degree of restriction on individual freedom is unlikely to be that extreme that you cannot feel happiness. The flip side here is that you're actually more able to pursue freedom when your basic needs are met by collectivism security nets. This directly goes against their point that minorities can't even get any needs. So number two, individuals are able to obtain an objective examination of happiness on our side. Communities provide a frame of reference as to what meaning and fulfillment means. Our perception of fulfillment and freedom is only clarified when we live in a collectivist society where we feel good about helping and participating in our community in a way that allows us to be fulfilled. So at least on our side, if the minorities can't get rich enough because of the systemic barriers against them, they won't feel like they have failed in life because they already know what fulfillment means, and that is something that's attainable on our side. People gain fulfillment from the relationships that they build and the effort that they invest and receive. On proposition, individualistic culture forces you to conform around vague ideals of freedom, and this usually revolves around monetary pursuits. There's no real freedom here, just the delusion of it. So what's the impacts on our side? Rather than individual pursuits, fulfillment becomes about building and sustaining a machine rather than like a competition where you have to get better when you have to push others down. Your life becomes more than yourself because you are part of a community that will outlive you and that becomes a home for your children in the same way that it was for you. I think this is a very incentive that you make sure to protect the minorities because you think that your loved one might become you want your loved one to be unconditionally accepted into the community as well. Your actions affect the culture and the interactions of the community. This is something that you as an individual find meaningful outside the capitalistic system that you are trapped in. On our worst case scenario, we trade off individual self-actualization for basic needs, but this is we are okay to make that trade-off because it's for the good for everyone in the community. So in the end, we help give a relatively good quality of life, even within limits in a collectivist society, which is much more meaningful. For that, I'm very proud to oppose.
Yeah. All right. I think the second op. Now I call upon third prop. Yeah.
Am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are. You are a bit soft though, so try to speak a bit loudly.
Okay. Is it better now?
No, so
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge, the other side does not understand that we have proven to you that with clear, accurate mechanisms why the minorities are actually going to get no power on their side and why they cannot get any power at all on their side. So first of all, I'll provide you with 2 clashes. The first one on minorities and the second one on the rest of the community or majorities, and then I will weigh off and tell you why we win this debate as a whole. So first of all, to my first clash about minorities. On their side, they have been providing you with a few lines of analysis. First one, that the minorities will actually form their own group and then they will go and help each other. But on our side, we're telling you that this is not true because first of all, when the whole idea of them forming their own groups is not because we're a community, but because it's for their own sake, right? They want to save themselves, and we actually see this as a mechanism for them to actually save themselves in the society. And they said the minorities are going to help each other, but as my other speaker has told you, that they cannot help each other, let alone themselves, when they're in this collective society, because no one cares about them. Everyone thinks, there's just a competition. As long as we take down this minority, then we will actually get whatever we want and they will take the resources. You need to understand that there is a set amount of resources in a world, right? But then when there are majority and minority, let's say 10% and 90% fighting for this, obviously the minority is going to get kicked out, even if the 1% across the country bonds, right? Then even if, let's say they bond, then the 10% will get 10 times the hate and no one's going to survive from that group. Yes, I'll take the POI.
Won't the incentive to create communities on our side, people want to like feel belonging to a community rather than like become richer together?
The point that you need to understand is they cannot feel like a sense of community. It doesn't matter for them when they're actively going to hate on the society, when they can't even get their basic needs met, which is going to happen on your side of the world because you're not going to give them any resources. None of their needs are going to get met, right? And on their side, they have also provided us with a second line of analysis that it is better for the vulnerable on their side because they have like the least powers currently and they will get the most amount of support. But they have admitted that they have the least amount of power. This is exactly why they have been getting ignored in the society because the government, like everyone else around them, knows that, oh, when I ignore the people with the least power, they are not going to stand up against it. They're not going to start like a freaking revolution, which is exactly why they have been ignored, and this is exactly why they have no power, right? And they also said that they're going to get support first, but this is not true because as I have already told you, the public does not care, the government does not care, no one cares about them. And lastly, they also told you that they will push down the minorities first. And this is exactly why there's no like minority. But then there's no, first of all, there's no minority on our side because everyone's equal. Everyone has equal competition. And there's going to be equal competition anyways because there's a certain pool of resources, which means on their side, they're going to find some kind of
POI.
Say no. Guys, I think my speech okay already. Focus.
And I'll move on to my second clash on community. So first of all, they're given us 4 lines of analysis. First of all, they said that the community will actually try to help others and they will like be not selfish on their side, but then the majority will like help ours in our side as well. But then also on their side, they are going to try to find some kind of competition on their side, as I have already proven to you in my first clash, which is why even if they say, oh, we're going to help others, there's no 100% guarantee that they're going to help and support other people. And on our side, we are going to support others if it brings us net benefit. For example, I'm going to donate at a charity because it brings me more reputation, or I'm going to go and do survey because it looks good on my college application, right? Which is why we will get some kind of net benefit anyways. And also the other side has said like individual societies provide strict social values. For example, you have to be like pretty successful, etc. And then they said we force conformity while they said there's a measurement of success. But judge, opposition is completely ignoring our frame. They kept saying this, but never explained why. Why would there be strict social expectations when the core value of individualistic societies, as we frame it, is to respect every person as an individual of like themselves, right? We also like to clarify the difference between values and freedom. Individualism does not force a single value system on everyone. It simply allows people to choose their own values. And yes, individualistic societies may have social trends like beauty standards, etc., but they do not have rigid values enforced by like families, etc. And individualized societies create choices even when trends exist. And let's say, okay, sure, it's true, like the trends and like the minorities change over time. This is exactly why we need to support the minorities, because there are evolving groups of minorities over time, which means that everyone going to be a minority at some point in time, which is why we need to support them and make sure that they thrive on themselves when they become the minority, right? And second line of analysis that they provided with us, for societal expectations and like about like how the community is going to have an interest in application, but I don't think we see how this stands because the societal expectations is going to be harder for them when everyone's expecting them to like only follow like what the society wants them to do, and they will actually not get to pursue any of their own passion and their own happiness. And next, on competition, they said that you will fail if others succeed, you will only succeed if others fail. But then for them, they can't even succeed because they can't even succeed because first of all, they're not working in their own interest, and second of all, they are working as a big whole group because they can't even succeed individually, which means that there's going to be no success on their side anyways. And therefore, I'll move on to some weighing. So for us to win, we have to prove why we get the most amount of happiness and most amount of people support on our side. So the majority is going to be happy anyways on both sides, because for example, if they are on like their side, the majority is getting supported by the government, everyone's going along the majority. But then on our side,
when they are being individual, then the majorities will also get happiness because they are like going and competing for the resources themselves, which means that they will be happy. The winning point is the minority, and the minority on our side will get support, because on their side they will just get absolutely ignored, and there will be no impact on them, which is why I'm so proud to stand on proposition. Thank you.
Hey, here, I think the third prop, I now call upon the option here.
Can I check that I'm audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Sorry, can I check the audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, proposition has come up here and made the losing assertion that people are going to care about each other, understand people's experiences in individualistic cultures. If you disprove this claim, we take down the premise of their entire case, and we will in this speech. That's why we win. Proud to oppose. First, a few responses. They said that minorities will not have the basic needs met because they are not allowed into the community. First, this is not true, because if you are going to treat others with kindness and inclusivity, you will treat minorities with the same kindness that is already fixed in their inherent nature. They literally conceded that a majority of people can become the minority. So why would these people then create such an exclusive community if they know that they are at risk of turning into the minority? This is something that my second has already told you. You are born into it. Even if they can turn into individualistic manners after a while just for their basic survival, but we say that this stops them from becoming like this delusional and wanting more apart from survival needs. We already told you so many times that these things will happen on our side, and they never responded to it. They never gave us mechanisms why minorities won't face the same stigmas in individualistic society that prevents them from even going up the ladder. First, callouts and clarifications for today. First, proposition case is very idealistic and optimistic by claiming that in an individualistic society, everyone's rights are championed. This is just untrue that individualistic societies champion everyone's rights. They also assert this, but never actually tell you how this takes place. They just run a negative case and tell us why we're losing. Second, they never tell you why people in an individualistic society have any incentive to care about each other. My LO literally tells you that in a capitalist society, you have to step over each other to progress in life, and they don't engage with this fact. The reason why people care about each other is because of the importance society places on community. It is unclear as to why people are encouraged to care. Third, proposition claims that on our side, minorities won't want to integrate into society because they can't even get basic needs. We literally tell you that on our side, people are taught and hardwired to know from the moment they're born that they have a duty to care and help everyone, to ensure everyone's needs are met for the betterment of society. We mitigate and prevent the chance of this even happening in our side, and when this is where we truly benefit and protect the minorities. So on to my first clash on who better supports minorities. They said that minorities cannot be truly free and protected in a society that relies on a culture of collectivism because what they want contrasts the interests of the majority. The only option for them to be free is when they rely on themselves and exercise personal autonomy. However, we think this is unfeasible. We said that harm is measured on both sides, that because both sides, they're going to be like discrimination going to exist. Without a community, minorities are going to fight this discrimination, fight this injustice, and they're going to be left alone to fight this battle. What is the unique benefit we give to minorities? We provide a collectivist culture that gives people a group of people, a community that surrounds them. These are people who have the same similar experiences as them, people who can give each other advice and lift these people up. These are people who understand them and are able to relate to their experiences. There is no reason for people to not form a community if the problems minorities face is as bad as proposition frames. There is a huge incentive for people to build a community to combat the other collectivist communities that goes against them. So I'll be weighing this on best case, worst case. On their best case, even if we take all their benefits that minorities are free and protected, and their rights are protected, and it's actually enforced, we think that the majority still suffers. As much as Prop tries to claim that minority rights matter, we don't think that this should allow the trade-off for the majority. We think that in this case, the principle of utility still matters, and that the majority still benefits on our side. Thus, their best case here is helping minority groups. However, on our side, one, we still have minority groups. Our worst case here is that minority groups make their own collectivist groups inside larger collectivist groups, like a Chinese society in Malaysia that still champion for their own rights and still ensure that each of their own rights are protected. But we think that it's unlikely to happen because we think that a general collectivist society will still recognize other collectives and their values and will integrate them through and alternative shared identities. But let's interact with this regardless. Individualistic societies creates a worse us versus them mentality because of the capitalistic nature that demands you fight others and for a position. This was already set in second, and we hammered down we hammer this down the bench. That means that you now treat minorities and others as a means to an end. They also said that individuals are treated as a morally significant people, but we think that when there are an absence of shared identity, individuals will instead be treated as a means to an end. When you are no longer need to consider individuals as a part of collective, and thus you no longer need to fear that collectivist wrath when you do something wrong to that person. This results in the exploitation of minority groups or groups that are unable to stand for themselves because they aren't united as a collective. Proposition's failure to trade off and acknowledge the flaws of individualistic society is what loses them the debate, because you cannot have a cake and eat it at the same time. Second clash on which side better benefits society. They said that people are going to follow their life paths and hence can build society they can do what they want. But let's think about this a little bit more deeply. When you join a collectivist community, you begin to consider other people and not just yourselves. When people are born to an individualistic society, they grow up from a young age thinking they are the only people that matter, the only one whose opinion deserves to be listened to, and the people who they think that they're better than everyone. People are going to be open to understanding of what each other wants on our side. And I think that this pressure exists in a world where people are selfish, where they believe that their own opinion is the superior one. This is where you get the worst harms, right? And this is proposition's world. This harms exist greater than their world. We tell you that in our world, people grow up to understand and comprehend that they must prioritize the community for their own needs and not completely ignore them. But because everyone understands they have a duty and a societal expectation to give back to society, there's a more abundant society. People has each other's backs. This society does not exclude anyone, contrary to the entire case. With that, we win on the scale of impact. When people work individually and chase their own goals, progress is diluted because people only want to do things that benefit themselves. Hence, the impact they claim they get only exists at a personal level. They aren't receptive to working together with others, they have a superiority complex, and aren't likely to take people's feedbacks into consideration. We think that the most important issues surrounding the world cannot be solved when people work alone without understanding. Think of climate change, poverty. These are issues that need everyone's collective efforts working together to reach a final outcome. For all these reasons, never been prouder to oppose.
Yeah, I think third op, there'll now be a 2-minute break before the reply, starting now. Alright, 2 minutes have now elapsed. I call upon op reply. Here.
Making sure that I'm visible. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, proposition wants to have their cake and eat it. They claim that they help minorities, but also the majority. But we think that these are two contrasting impacts that cannot exist simultaneously, so incredibly proud to oppose. 4 reasons why we win today. First, we better help the minorities, a stakeholder that their entire case relies on, right? 3 things. We already tell you that the culture on our side has already grown to a way that accepts everyone as individual people, not to measure people and their popularity based on their financial income, etc. People are unlikely to suddenly be mean to minorities. Even if they did, we already told you that minorities form a community to fight against the majorities, and that this is even stronger than one on their side, because these minorities have no reason to betray one another for capitalistic incentives, but are more focused on having a sense of belonging. Second, on our side, if the minority still cannot succeed, at least they won't be playing a losing game, trying to achieve capitalistic perceptions of success. We already suggested that on their side, minorities, even if they got their basic needs, they still try to achieve monetary pursuits, which will only cause them to feel dejected when they get pushed down by the minority. Third thing, we already told you how even if minorities wanted to work for themselves, gain their own self-interest, they cannot because of the barriers placed upon them by the majority. We don't see them as use for them. Second reason on why we win, right? We help people in a larger scale. When they are able to chase success in ways that are realistic and attainable, we tell you that people are likely to chase things that are very much realistic, attainable, and non-materialistic, such as relationships. And this allows for the minorities and people in general on our side to feel content. But on their side, people who get their basic needs go beyond that into the needs for monetary pursuits, which all in all causes a cycle where people become more competitive in the name of these self-interests. And when people no longer feel the need to stay in their community, if it means being able to win the rat race. In fact, we think that in the worst cases, some individuals may even betray their communities for financial gain on their side. So the third reason why we win is that we win on the fact that people in society have care for each other. When you are in a society where the dominant value you're raised is one where only your progression and your achievement matters, people are obviously not used to suddenly caring about others, especially minorities. They must not have read the motion properly, because when you are born into this kind of society, your brain is not wired to care about others. And even if humans have inherent care for others, when those around you constantly reinforce this idea that you matter the most, seeing that a large base of their case is on how they benefit minorities and on the basis that we better protect minorities because of the fact that these minorities have those who face the same struggles as them to rise up against the majority. Our side ensures that everyone has incentives to look after one another and care for others because this is the values they were raised with. And for all those reasons above, this is why we entirely win this debate on our side.
Here, I think odd reply now. Finally, I call upon the prop reply to conclude this debate as a whole. Here. Right, okay.
Okay. So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Judge, throughout this debate, both teams argues which benefits individuals more, and especially the minorities. And I think it's very clear that the proposition wins this debate. Because throughout the debate, opposition kept ignoring the framings. Our entire first speaker spent so long to talk about our entire frame on how minorities will not be included. The entire case stand on this, and we have proven to you why in collective societies they will be ignored. So let's quickly recap this debate. In their argument, they talk about 1, how everyone cares for society and cares for each other. Well, we've already proven this really clear why we win with an even if at the best case scenario where everybody really cares for each other, we still win because their society model only functions by prioritizing what is the mainstream and what the majority wants, while the minorities are completely ignored. Second, the second argument is about how minorities can bond within themselves and just be happy as a community. The whole reason why they are bonding is to stop getting bullied by the majority and survive. They're just trying to survive and not trying to be a community. When they're ignored by the public, they need to save themselves first. This is the only incentive why they do this. So we'd rather have a society where the minorities are not bullied. There's also argued on how they still have minorities groups on their side, but this is wrong because minorities are minorities on their side, while our side, everyone is equal. We don't have minorities at all because we will get the cancel where every individual, every hobby, every value, every identity is protected. And our argument is about one, protecting minority communities, which each vulnerable minorities are protected as each individual. They fight for their own ability, using their own ability. Second, maximize individual happiness, where we allow people to have their own choice, like stated by my third speaker. We'd like to clarify the difference between value and freedom, where individualism does not force a single value system on everyone. Individualist society creates choice even when trends exist. Now moving on to my weighing, where majority will be happy anyways on both sides. This is because, one, majority will be supported by collective society. Majority will try hard and get resources in individualistic society. What matters is the minority, and we have proven to you that the minorities do not have the capacity to achieve anything because their opinions are different. Competition exists anyways, and opposition is just feeding a strong society, a weak group for them to target. Let's say they're right. People betray each other in a community. At least individuals are happy. At least it's fair that you're getting nothing because you have no ability, not because your opinion is the minority. And even, let's say, even at the best case, minorities get fulfilled, they're protected. They're like, oh, everybody cares about them, as what proposition said in their world is. Majority is happy with the society. We still win because we have a fair resource allocation, which has a bigger impact without one group hogging them. Because let's say even if minorities are fulfilled, they're still getting a competition from the majority. They didn't prove why competition will not exist on their side. And last, I just want to end this reply speech and end this debate by saying that a society only protects the majority is never fair. And individualistic societies, we protect both majority and a minority. And I think it's very clear the proposition wins the debate. That's why I'm so proud to propose.
Here, I thank the prop reply and I thank all speakers. We now virtually cross the floor and shake hands.